EverQuest Revisited, the show where we talk all things EverQuest. I'm your host, Darren. For those who may be new to the podcast, my goal is to provide a comprehensive look at the world of EverQuest, from its earliest days to the present. The podcast will cover both Everquest Live and P99, exploring the rich history and lore of this iconic game, and sharing the latest news and insights from the community. I'm thrilled to be joined today by a special guest who has a wealth of knowledge about one of the game's most popular private servers, P99. Battletoad, it's an honour to have you on the show.
Well, thank you. I feel honoured to have been chosen just to talk about Project 1999. I'm a level 60 troll shaman on the blue server, and my name is Battletoad, and I started in February of 2012. Everybody tells me every day, what a great name, and I say thank you. I can't believe I got it.
Is that the first time you played EverQuest, 2012?
No, I started back when it got really popular. Velius had been out for about a year, and I heard about it in high school, and there's some local kids, and it just sounded so great. Go to Best Buy, get my copy of Kunark. Have no idea what I'm doing. Like, Ixar, Lizard Man, that's cool. Shadow Knight sounds great. So I just off the bat picked the worst experience race combination for like leveling. Have no idea what I'm doing, but it was great. I saw the Ixar Shadow Knight armor. It was this green dread scale, forest green. I loved it, and I quested it. And ever since then, I just haven't been able to stop just exploring this world and doing things and just going places, and you never know what'll happen, really.
Did you take a break in between then? Because you said you joined P99 in 2012.
Oh, definitely. When I started in, I'll say 2000, and I played until about 2005, 2006, right when the Dragons of Norath and Depths of Dark Hollow came out. And the game, it just really started changing, and it wasn't the same anymore. It wasn't this classic just grind. It wasn't just as hard. It almost got a little too easy, with the introduction of Plane of Knowledge, all that. So I stopped. I remember raiding Omens of War, Gates of Discord.
Pretty much similar story to a lot of us. I think your story is very similar to my story and other people I've spoken to as well. Very similar stories, very similar dates of leaving EverQuest. So there was a big change there with those expansions.
Just those mid-2000s. It was sort of like when they, with Magic the Gathering, when they kept releasing expansions right after the other, and you just couldn't keep up.
What's the deal with the P99 servers? What made you choose to start the P99 server and not come back to live? What's the pull?
So P99 first came out in October of 2009, and I didn't hear about it until a few years later. Almost sort of shocked when a real-life friend told me that this place existed. I'm like, really? I went home, downloaded it, just couldn't believe it. It's almost like the closest thing to time travel, to going back to a place that they say you can't go home again. And for once, you can, and they strive to make it the most classic experience. It's the most accurate, time-locked place out there, for classic EverQuest, probably ever has been.
What's it like being in the P99, and exactly what is it? Because it's not Darkpool Games.
It is a private server. There was an agreement made with Daybreak, that it could be run. They have some of the older files, and it's just hard. If it wasn't hard, it probably wouldn't be worth it. There's no Plane of Knowledge. Even today, like, that's still a major hub, right? People still hang out there.
Yeah, it's still a place where we still go to I would say, the older worlds. A lot of it's done now through the guild hall and the guild lobbies now to move around through portals. We do have to go through Plane of Knowledge, especially if you're still playing lower level characters.
It just seemed that once Shadows of Lukeland came out, it really changed the dynamic of everything. There's enough to do with just the first, 3 expansions.
So the P99 experience is pretty much classic EverQuest then, is that right?
It's classic. There's experience lost. There's corpse runs. You have to get a port to places. You can choose which faction you want in Velius. There's a very competitive endgame.
What expansion does it actually go up to then?
It only goes up to Velius, the frozen one, where you have the giants versus the dragons versus the dwarves. There's Sleeper's Tomb.
So you still got Wick the Sleeper and that side of things.
When they released Green about 3 years ago, the Sleeper, he stayed awake for a while. There was one guild called SEAL Team, and they were right out the gate. They were the top guild. They had everything. And once they got into Sleeper's Tomb, they kept it going for quite a while. and then they decide to wake the sleeper. It's probably the last time sleeper will be woken, unless they release a new server.
How many servers do they have then?
They actually have 3. When they released Blue, they also released P99 Red, which is a PvP server, which really, it's mostly an empty server. It still has a strong population of about maybe 50, 100 people, but I haven't seen it go higher than a few hundred. Then they have the green one, which was the most accurate timeline ever. They kept it with just Classic, and then the same amount of time between Classic and Kunark being released. Then they released Velius when it was supposed to come out, and it had all the legacy items. It had Mana Stones and the Guise of the Deceiver, the item where you could click into a Dark Elf no matter who you were. It had the planks. It had Holgresh Elder Beads. All this fun stuff. Like, you could actually go for it.
So that's green. The other server is the blue. Tell me what's the difference between the green and the blue server?
Green server only came out 3 years ago, and it's already into the end game of Velius. Sleeper's gone. Blue server, when that launched, it just had the green, the original, just no expansions. Max level is 50. You've got your Lady Vox, the Ice Dragon. You've got Lord Nagafen, the Fire Dragon. Those are pretty much your raid mobs. Kazakh Thul, Inaruk, Plane of Sky. That's about it right there. So that lasted a while. And then they released Kunark. And Kunark is only supposed to be out for a year and a half or so before Velius. Instead, the blue server had Kunark for at least a good 5 years. 3 years, 5 years. So you have a lot more time to do that content, a lot more time to get Vishan's peak keys, a lot more time to farm the armor. So it was kind of staggered. So when Velius comes out, I remember the day. There were so many people on the raft in Oasis. There's so many people on the icebreaker boat in the ice-clad ocean. It was so fun. There had to be hundreds of people there.
To be fair, that brings me on nicely to the community. I hear is pretty tight-knit community on the P99. Tell me a bit about the community there. Is it still the same as it was before? Are they helpful? Is it very competitive?
People, for the most part, yeah. Everybody's friendly, helpful. If you're a new player, someone can just tell. They'll probably hand you a piece of gear and hand you some money. I buff people, court people. It's always nice to surprise someone with a POTG, Protection of the Glades, a super buff.
I have heard something about the taxiing. Is that a thing on those servers? There is a guild actually who port people around?
It's such an amazing idea. It's like Uber and Everquest. It's called Dial a Port, and someone had this brilliant idea at least 5+ years ago, where it's all druids and wizards, and you can pretty much do a who dial all at any given time. And you say, hey, can you pick me up here? And I'd like to go here. And they say, sure. And it's a good alt guild. It's a great way to just make some platinum, if you're a new player, or if you just are bored and just want to do something else for a minute instead of raid 18 hours a day. Yeah, it's a great concept. Sometimes they even offer a dial a res, where they'll bring a cleric and come res you if you died somewhere really fun like Ocean of Tears or Kesora.
Do they have dial a corpse run? Because I think, I think it's awesome to hear that. Yeah, it's unbelievable. I think that's quite clever for somebody to come up with that. I'm assuming they make a lot of platinum.
I think they do pretty well. Yeah, it's dependable, it's reliable, and just saying, I'll get a dial or I'll get a DAP is pretty common. It's just part of the language here. Yeah.
Cool. So obviously with the P99, you're all still playing Everquest. It's still generally the same game. Obviously, it's on a private server. Do you have GMs still?
There are game masters. They are making sure that people aren't two boxing.
So you're saying on the P99 servers, it's banned?
Right, as part of the classic experience, to try to go back, to the 90s, 2000s. Most people didn't have two computers or, weren't paying the extra $15 a month or just didn't have the time, to play more than one character. And to try and keep it true to that, they don't allow two boxing. It would just take out the fun, of grouping with other people, because the game is about playing with other people. I mean, it is about community. And definitely just in today's age, I feel like everybody the 1,000 people or more that play on here do really know each other better than they would have back in the day. Because you've got Discord, you've got the website, you have the Wikipedia, there's forums, the communication. It's there, and your reputation does matter, and that's why it's best, just be nice. That's the best way to do it. Honesty, be good, helpful. You need other people to make it in this game. It's a really harsh world out there just to survive in this place. I can't believe some of the stuff that we do.
Are there any different rule sets on those servers than there are, or what they were to what you remember on the original EverQuest?
There are a lot of different things. GMs were just, having to deal with the same conflicts, over endgame rating.
Yeah.
That they had to do things like root the dragons in Temple of Vishan, which I think happened later on in the timeline. It got to where you could pull a dragon to the entrance of Temple of Vishan, and GMs were just having to deal with that. For a while, the GMs they would always have a fun event around Halloween. They might reset the server. There might be the classic werewolves running around the commons. Sometimes they would spawn giant mobs that would crash the zone, and you would get funny loot at the end.
I think we get a similar thing on live. They seem to work around the festive holidays, and we get the Christmas one, and I think we've got a Valentine's one coming up soon as well. So we don't really see GMs in live anymore. I don't think there are GMs in live.
I'm pretty sure there's always some around on P99. They respond pretty quickly, depending on what you need. It might be 10 minutes. It might be within a few hours. You might catch them at weird times, real early in the morning. There's a couple. But they're really nice people. I've never had a problem with any of them. I've met tons of them. I like taking screenshots with them. Sometimes they'll run around and turn you into funny creatures. They might turn your entire raid into frog locks or gnomes. We even recently just had one where we were raiding in Temple of Vishan, and we were going for a dragon, and they turned our entire raid into gnomes, and our guy couldn't get up the stairs to run the train away. So it interfered with the pull.
I've been in a situation as well, similar to probably where you get Shank, and you can't get up the steps, you can't jump over. So it's different, and it probably freshens it up a bit. What's the population like on these servers?
See, how many people are online right now? You can just check the wiki page even, it'll tell you. Right now, it's about 7 p.m. prime time, Saturday night. You have over 1,100 people on green, and that's the newer server, the 3-year-old one. And there's about 700 people on blue, and right now there's 70 people on red. Almost 2,000 people playing on this private server on a Saturday night. It's the place to be. It's the only server that you can go to if you want to play like this.
You hear a lot of people, even now, even on live, it's not as good as it was. It's not the same. It's got too easy.
Really not.
And I think there's an argument for both sides. For me, I loved EverQuest back in the day, but the corpse runs and all that time consuming after wiping, trying to find your body, and I haven't got the time these days. So for me, live suits me. It's great to know there is somewhere for people to go who can actually play classic EverQuest and still enjoy it. The P99 is a good route for them. What about you as a player then? Do you feel that you had to change your playing style to play on P99?
When I played back on live, that was a Shadow Knight. So I played as a Shadow Knight. You would snare something, fear it. You learn what you're capable of, like what you can go do. And I feel like that's about the same. Depending on what class you play, it's an entirely different approach to the game, whether you're a paladin or a monk or druid. So I'd only played the Shadow Knight and the druid. So for me, it was really just an entirely new learning curve. I picked a shaman. I remember them being the superstars of raids back in the day. And I learned how to solo. I learned how to be, I'd say, more patient. It's a learning game. You have to learn from your mistakes. There's consequences. And the corpse runs. If you die, it's like a half-hour, recovery. So definitely try to play a little more seriously. Try not to die, and try to pay attention a bit. My focus isn't the greatest. So I've learned that I probably shouldn't play a bard or an enchanter because I forget I was here and then we'd all die.
The bard is me. And that's pretty much the only class I play because I just enjoy that class so much. I've been playing a little bit of a necro a little bit because a few of us are doing a little sort of starting from scratch as a group, working our way from start to finish on live, and we're all frog locked. So I chose a necro. I'm struggling. I'm just missing all my stuff the bard can do, but it is fun to learn another class. So I am enjoying it, and I really look forward to. We do it once a week, and I'm looking forward to logging on, playing with these guys as our frogs. It's not a bard, you know what I mean? So it's never going to overtake my main character, but it is fun. In your experience, what sets them apart, these two P99 and EverQuest servers?
There's some pretty basic ground rules for P99 that the GMs do strongly enforce. Again, there's no two boxing, no multi-boxing, and they will run around and test for that. They'll make you run figure eights. I'd say 9% of the time people fail. You can get an IP exemption as long as you actually have another real person playing with you. Easy to get, just request one. In case you're wondering, wow, classic EverQuest, can I play with my wife? Can I play with my friend? Yes, you can. Just ask. Don't two-box. There's no real money trading. Very strongly enforced. There's no chronos. You can't just buy an item. Then sometimes they'll have these fun PvP events where you'll get a title. They'll have a best of the best. On Green a while ago, they had a fun one. Came down to the best Shadow Knight versus the best Paladin in a pretty fun duel, and the Shadow Knight won. It was an ogre. And then you never know when it might happen. There'll be an earthquake, which the entire screen will start to shake. There'll be a yellow broadcast saying that the gods of Norath are laughing at you, and you should probably go somewhere safe because the entire server gets reset. All the gods and dragons and monsters and everything just pops in the next 2 minutes, and the entire server goes into a frenzy where you just raid nonstop. You go after all your favorite classic targets. Do King Tormax, Statue of Rallis Zek, the Avatar of War. You got Zlandikar, Klandikar, all Temple of Vishan. It's just chaos. You can't be everywhere at once. It's a fun time for everybody. It gives everybody a pretty good shot.
That sounds really awesome. I mean, I haven't come across that in live's not done anything like that. So when you say it resets, so the screen shakes, you physically see it shaking, or is
it happens suddenly? The entire screen will shake as if you were G-fluxed. It's that same graphic, and there'll be a big giant GM broadcast, and it just catches you off guard. It just suddenly, it's like you'll feel that adrenaline kick, and you just know that you're about to go down this roller coaster of just 80 to 100 people are going to log in, and it's time to raid. You're running around the entire world with your army. It's so much fun.
So the servers must get really busy. Everybody trying to compete for the same mobs, get there before the others to get these kills. Because the timers are reset, everything's up.
Right, because they actually had to add in variants here, where normally it might be 3 days on the dot that a dragon would repop. You'd have everybody just knowing when it was coming. So they had to add in variance windows. So when there's a reset, you just know everything is up. That first hour, it's crucial. Like, minutes matter, deciding where you're going, what you're doing. The biggest targets, they don't last long. And yeah, it's competitive. It's pretty fierce. It's an arms race half the time.
Big question on that one then for me is sleepers. If he's been woken up, right, does he get reset?
We've always hoped. It hasn't happened yet. I'm not saying never, but it hasn't happened yet. One Christmas, a GM appeared in the East Common Lands tunnel, which is still alive and thriving. There's no bazaar. Come hang out in the EC tunnel, just like you remember it.
Yeah, I remember those days, yeah.
Yeah, they were good. The GM asked a random person. He was pretty much like, make a wish. You gave anything you wanted, what would you want? And he of course asked for Guise of the Deceiver, which is just pretty good, but he could have asked for anything. He could have asked to reset the warders, bring back the sleeper, make it, whatever. I like his choice. I probably would have gone for an Ixar egg personally myself, which I don't think any even exists. That's the Ixar illusion item the GM could give out.
Nice. That, for me, it sounds like the GMs are really involved. They're trying to keep it fresh. Where they're not adding new content, they're adding something different, which is really good to keep the P99 community interested and continue playing. Because that was my fear with P99. is once you got to Velius, what do people do? Once they get to the end, they raided everything.
Do it again.
Yeah, I mean, is that what they do? Do they re-roll? Do they just disappear and never come back?
I have seen a lot of people come and go. Like, what does a shaman do when you hit level 60 and you get your epic and torpor? Well, you quit. That's how you play the game. My favorite event was one Halloween. They put a lot of effort into a really fun hide and seek where they put various NPCs around the world and they gave little clues and you kind of had to run around and just like hail them. And the first person to finish it got a pretty neat reward, got a really nice raid item, and everybody else that did it within the time period, they got some fun stuff. That was really cool. Sometimes the GMs would have a fun trivia event. I really wish there were more GM events. Just random mobs, popping here and there. Maybe Kazakh will come visit you. But yeah, they're pretty fun.
That for me would keep me sort of interested, because I have thought about playing P99, but it's a time thing for me. That part of it with all these GM events, the earthquake thing sounds really good. I mean, it probably won't work so much on live because, we got instances now, so you can just jump into an instance. So if someone kills a raid mob, the other guild can just go and raid it anyway by calling it instance. Right. So there's none of this waiting around, which also I've heard all the horror stories and I've been sat and waiting for the mobs to spawn 7 days. I think 8 hours either side, it could actually spawn. So you've got to get there very quickly and be the first guild to be there. So you're sat there around there for 8 hours, and then I think they called it socking. Yep. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of stocking here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm assuming is that still going on in the stocking?
Yeah. The tradition is still going. Wow, very strong.
The waiting, but I think that's how you made your friends anyway. That's the times when you're sitting down, regenerating your mana between mobs if you're grinding, or if you're on a long waiting for something to spawn. That's where you would sit there and start making your friendships. Yeah.
Yeah. I've met quite a lot of people, actually. One of my favorite zones, usually where you'll find a different kind of adventurer, is Tower of Frozen Shadow, which is an ice-clad ocean in Velius. And it's pretty neat. Each floor is unique and will have a key to get to the next floor. And yeah, that's usually where I meet people.
You said about the Sleeper, which the guild you said was SEAL Team. That's the number one guild on the server, is that right?
They were the number one guild. SEAL Team still exists in spirit. Players, they're still around. A lot of them are gone. I'd say Green has a pretty friendly end game. It's mostly between good guys. I'd say most of SEAL Team is there. Kingdom, Venerate, then a few others. I'd say those are the top three.
Is SEAL Team still in existence, or is it no longer?
No, you might occasionally see a tag in the tunnel, but they're gone. They were the number one guild starting on day one.
Right.
And they said they weren't going to wake the Sleeper, but it just got to the point where it was inevitable. He had a pretty good sleep. He stayed dreaming for a while, and they did it last summer. I want to say August, and they had a huge event. It was the first time ever that you knew it was coming. And when the Sleeper wakes up, and it only happens once, and this is so cool if you never heard about this.
I know about the Sleeper and what happens, but maybe a lot of the listeners haven't. So tell the story.
Right. The Sleeper, who is a prismatic rainbow dragon, which is actually the child of the original 2 EverQuest dragons, the Lord Nagafen, the fire, and the Lady Vox, the ice. And that's why they were imprisoned in a cave somewhere. He is too strong. He's too powerful. So he's locked away deep underground in the frozen continent of Velius, pretty much dragon prison. There's all kinds of guards, golems, sentries, gargoyles, and he has 4 dragons that are watching him to make sure he doesn't wake up. And they're called the Warders. The Warders drop some really great loot. Still, if you could find it on live servers today, they're antiques. They're pretty cool. Some of it's tradable. And once the Sleeper wakes up, it's gone. What they would do is they would kill 3 out of the 4 warders at any given time and just make sure that one was always up. You'd have to choose which one are you going to leave up. Once you kill all 4, he wakes up and he goes on a rampage and pretty much runs from his prison to the temple of Claws of Vishan to go slay Lord Jelinek, who's the leader of the Claws of Vishan, the dragons in Velius. It's the first time ever that he went on his world rampage, and the people were waiting for him at Jelinek, and they even killed the scripted Jelinek that the Sleeper's supposed to come kill. And that was pretty fun. There were hundreds of people there.
So they killed Jelinek before the Sleeper got there.
Right.
So what happened with the Sleeper when he got there? Did they kill him, or that's not possible, is it?
If you remember, there's a really great story if that happened back in the day where on Ralsek, a few of all the major PvP guilds got together and took down the Sleeper and took all day. But no, the Sleeper got there, Jelinek's not there, and then he pretty much just killed everybody that was there waiting for him to show up.
I've heard the stories, I've not seen it, so I've never been online when the Sleeper's been woken up, because I hear that he goes from there, obviously from where he is, his tomb, where he's going to meet Jelinek. I hear that if he flies through zones, is that right, that anybody in his way would get killed?
That sounds a lot like Deathwing and Cataclysm, but yeah, he's the original Deathwing, where he'd go from underground to a giant ice zone, the Eastern Wastes. And yeah, I think he would just kill everybody in the zone. It was just kind of an AoE effect.
Would they actually see him, do you know?
I'm pretty sure that it was scripted, that he'd be running across the zone. And as far as I know, it's the only time any NPCs would zone. He'd zone out of Sleepers, Eastern Waste through the giant city of Kale, then through Awakening Lands into Sky Shrine. And I think go all the way to the top of Sky Shrine. Yeah, so he would physically travel. I do think you'd see him if he didn't put out a zone-wide, just a death touch first. I think there's a video of it.
Yeah, I'll have to look it up because that sounds really cool. It does sound cool.
Definitely a moment in P99 history, and unless they put out another server, will never happen again. I hope they can come out with a new one.
I've not asked. Is he actually still sleeping in any of the P99 servers, or he's woken on all of them?
He's been woken on all of them. He was woken on Blue by Rampage, and I don't even know whatever happened on Red with him. As far as I know, I don't think Tunari has ever died on the Red server, and Red doesn't even really have enough people on it now to take down most of the endgame dragons ever since they rooted them.
Right.
And if you actually have gear like that, you're called Legacy geared on the Red server.
Are you on is it the wiki or something?
I'm looking at the P99 wiki, which is really great and definitely part of P99, the appeal. You have this just endless database that's player run, player edited. Now, I like contributing it too, adding all kinds of fun stuff, tweaking things, making sure it's right. But yeah, you have a vast encyclopedia of everything classic EverQuest that you can look up. There's no more guesswork. You don't have to think, how does this work? Where was that thing? I just like to sit there and browse the database and find items I didn't even know existed and see what they do.
It's a great tool. I mean, if we had that back in the day, there wasn't much. We had Alakazam and stuff like that, but it was still in its infancy. People were updating it, probably similar to the wiki, but that's had so many years put into it now. So it's probably a treasure trove of information, where back then, drawing your own maps and trying to find your way around and making notes of everything and just learning of other people back then, someone telling you what you had to do or what item to get. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's a godsend and still not as easy as what we've got on live with all our maps.
There's no map. I do think that there are some overlays that you can use that are allowed. I still look up maps all the time. There's no find. There's the button. You can hit find and it'll say there is nothing easily found in this zone.
Right.
It's just there for fun.
So what about you as a player? Are you in a guild?
I'm on Blue, and I'm in Vanquish, which I would say is the top guild of Blue. They've been through a few different reformations. When I first started, I think my first guild ever, forgive me, Snackies, Enraptured. I can never remember which one is which. That was my first guild, where just leveling up in high keep, killing goblins, meet some people. You never know who you might be playing with. I met a few people. I met Snackies who is now the premier human player of P99. He has every single human class available. They all have epics. The only class that a human can't be is a shaman. And now he's an end game player, and he's in my guild with me. And he even led a guild back in the day called Russell. Russell was a really cool guild. I liked them a lot. And when they disbanded, guildless for a bit, joined Azure Guard. Azure Guard was one of the longest lasting guilds. Then I'm not sure what happened. Joined Aftermath after a while. They went a few different revisions and merged with Azure Guard and eventually became Vanquish. And I'd say that most of the competition on P99 Blue is between Vanquish and Riot. There's still a few upcoming guilds too. There's Kittens Who Say Meow. Yep, Kittens.
Was that Kittens? Right, okay.
It's a real guild. They've been around for a long time, and they started out as just a cute guild like we're Kittens Who Say Meow. They're still just every single day, chipping away, and they raid now too.
So they'll be lions soon, or is that the plan? They're going to be the lions.
Yeah, be called Lions Who Say Meow.
What's your favorite raid out of all the raids you've done? What
Wow.
would you say is your favorite of all time raids? Because it sounds like you've been playing a long time. First of all, have you done every raid available?
Believe it or not, I actually haven't raided Sleeper's Tomb. I was in SEAL Team, was sort of a spectator. I was sort of just kind of like on the sidelines. I never made it to max level during any of the expansions to actually raid with them. So I haven't done Sleepers, but I'd say everything in Classic EQ, I've raided. I can't even comprehend how many of these targets I've probably taken down over the past decade. For favorite raid, I think I have a love-hate relationship with Plane of Sky. It's just such a neat, unique zone that still exists in classic, in modern day EQ. Like you could go there right now and some of the mobs death touch and it's still just the same it was. It's just so neat. It's got these islands that are chained up in the sky. Each island has a different theme to it. Like there's fairies and colorful parrots and bees and flying imps and Pegasus and genies. It's all air things. It's just such a neat place and it's so unique. And there's all these fun quests that you can do. I would say I've quested practically everything out of Plane of Sky across 6 classes, which is very time consuming. I've probably been there hundreds and hundreds of times. And it's like, want to go to Plane of Sky? It's like groan. It's like, yeah.
Is that the one Plane of Sky? You needed keys, is that right?
You did need keys.
Is that where you had the island full of corpses?
Right. Island 1, you pop up, and there's still an island floating in sky that just has hundreds of just naked bodies with keys on
them. Yeah.
Because you have to course your keys. There's no key ring.
Yeah.
And if you jump out of the zone, they disappear. If you fall off the edge of Plane of Sky, your keys are gone.
Plane of Sky. So what's the raid mob out there?
There's a few different raid targets. Each island has its own boss mob. Right. I would say it starts getting relatively hard by Island 5, which is the one covered in parrots. You have the Spirok Lord, and he's still pretty tough. He might have a sword or two, and he can death touch, and he's pretty fun. You can farm him sometimes, might kill a dozen Spirok Lords in a night, because these are where all the epic pieces are. Plane of Sky has epic pieces for warriors, shadow knights, magicians. Island 6 has bees. There's a giant Bixie Queen. She's still tough, drops some pretty good stuff. Island 7 has a Sister of the Spire. She's a genie. Then at the top island, you have the Eye of Vishan, which is a big magenta butterfly, one of those Drixie mobs. Some of the hardest mobs in the game, you could say, are the real boss mobs, the raid mobs of Plane of Sky, are the nobles, which are your classic noble DeJorn, that drops the gold in the Freedy boots. So There's three genies up in sky. You have the Noble DeJorn, you have the Overseer of Air, and you have the Hand of Vishan, and they're all pretty tough. They do massive damage, AoE, fire AoE, and they drop some pretty cool quest items, so they don't live too long. They also drop the rest of the golden armor. It's like, what do you do once you've reached endgame? Is here on P99, fashion quest. You can spend a year trying to get an entire gold outfit, from Plane of Sky, because the gold armor only drops off of the Ifritis up there, and they might only pop once or twice a week. There's so much to do. You can play the game however you want.
I've heard other people talking about them playing a little bit of P99. I've done a bit of research, obviously, before we spoke, and a lot of people were going on about they would play the game, and if they die, that'd be it. They got to start again and put in their own little rule sets to make it a little bit more interesting. That last it longer, make it more of a challenge.
Permadeath.
That's it. Permadeath. That's the one. Yeah. So I mean, that must be. I probably wouldn't even get past level 10.
I think that while playing this is definitely hard enough, with your experience penalties and your different class or race bonuses or penalties, there was a guild out there for a while called Auld Lang Syne, and that was the hardcore guild. You could only use things that you personally acquired. You'd have to loot it off the mob, or you'd have to purchase it yourself, or you had to make it yourself. And if somebody ran by and buffed you, that was fine, but you couldn't go out of your way and ask somebody for a buff. It was like playing Diablo 3 hardcore mode without the permadeath, and it truly was a challenge. I can't imagine playing like that. Like, I feel like my first trip through P99 on blue, at least my first two tunes, and still my first character on green, just starting with nothing was hard enough. But to put that restriction on yourself like that's like I said, you can play the game any way you want, but it was kind of cool to inspect them and see what odd gear they might have. But then when you started seeing members with like their epic, or like an eye patch of plunder, or just any quest armor, raid gear, you recognize the struggle, you recognize the grind, it's like respect the hustle. Like, it's really challenging. And I feel like everybody who's here, they're here because they want to be here. It's the only place to go. I can't imagine, while people have, messed with the idea of a permadeath server, and I can't see that happening.
Too much for some people, I'm guessing. I mean, to go the permadeath route is going to be committed. It's going to be re-rolling a lot. You probably invest a lot of time into that character. And because let's admit, it's a lot slower to level up than it is now on the live servers. So I remember what it was back then, just to get to level 60. I could see where people would pretty much got to be hardcore to get to even level 30. That's a lot of time just putting in to get to level 30 and then just dying in some lava or something. Or drowning in a river somewhere. And then I got to re-roll because I had a bit of lag. I mean,
the best part of leveling is...
Yeah, that's hardcore.
It's like you might ding level 30 about 3 times. That's
difficult.
Fun. Sometimes there'll be these fun events. They might be GM sponsored, or it might just be player sponsored, and there'll always be rewards. It'll be the naked halfling race, or the naked gnome race, or the naked ogre race, something like that. And it's always a level 1. There'll be people watching, no buffs, no cheating, good sportsmanship. And it'll be, say, run from Rivervale to, what would be a good place?
I'm trying to think of one myself now from Rivervale, so Kinos.
Yeah, that's what I thought too, actually.
Why not Kinos? City to city. Go for it.
Yeah. Run your level 1 halfling from Rivervale to Kinos, and you have to know the geography. You have to know where you're going. And sometimes, depending on which direction you're going, like say you're going to run through Runny Eye, if you're not part of the initial first push past those Redcon goblins, you're probably not going to make it. So there's a little bit of strategy involved. Or who knows? You could be one zone away from Kinos and a random lion gets you, in West Karana. It's usually pretty fun. There'll be a neat reward. You never know, plat, or it's just for fun.
Have you won?
No. one time they had one that anybody who made it across the finish line would get a reward, and the GM summoned me a neat low-level ring. I can't remember what it was, but I knew it was a little bit unique.
So that actually brings me on to another question I was going to ask, because that's perfect. So
Yeah.
obviously, items and gear, do they have anything which isn't in the standard EverQuest? Have they actually created any unique items for P99?
I don't think that there's any exclusive non-classic content here. A nice catchphrase here is not classic, even though a lot of stuff might be a little not classic.
That's all the time we have for today's episode, but stay tuned for next episode where we'll continue our interview all about P99 with Battletoad. Thank you for listening and safe journey.